And one of the things this woman was saying was that, without people doing things that require forgiveness, do we ever learn the skill of forgiveness? Without ever going through something difficult, do we ever learn compassion? And I think this is part of with the difficult things in life, it helps build us to be more complete human beings, but also in team management as well as practice managers, as practice owners, it's the difficult things that make us fully rounded, that make us develop all the skills. So did you hear that?
What was
Did
it?
you hear that? Oh, it was a truck that I thought they were about to smash into the house. They were tuning like crazy. It must delete it out of it. So I was just waiting for the bank. And and so it is the difficult stuff within teams that allows us to see the importance of making a really good team culture. How do we manifest it? How do we foster it? How do we adjust it going forward? It's the difficult stuff that allows us to do that. Because if everything was rosy all the time, we wouldn't learn any of these skills.
That's right. And it's a bit like, a marriage or anything else. When we overcome these hardships in a relationship, then the relationship's usually, stronger. Can be make or break, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to hit the share screen again now that I'm actually recording. And we're going to go into team conflict. So one way dysfunction of, oh, that's okay. I didn't read it properly. One way dysfunction of a team can play out is when there is a conflict between a couple or several people. Team conflict is the breakdown of interpersonal relationships. So it's not always the fault of the leadership or the management of that team. It's just the individuals within the team have developed a bit of a conflict. The causes of team conflict can be one person just takes a dislike to another. And meaning, isn't our life filled with experiences of we just don't like somebody? We don't particularly have a very good reason why. We just chose not to like them.
Well, we're human beings and we're very judgy, regardless
Yeah,
if we like to think so or not.
that's right. Another reason for team conflict could be a difference of opinion. I mean, I remember times where there'd be a difference of opinion on how to manage a patient complaint, or how to do a particular task in the stereo room. One person's got one level of experience, the other one's got another, thought of how to do things. But just a difference of opinion, rather than looking at the opinion as just being a difference of opinion, we make that maybe a little bit more personal. Competitive position. Recently, Minnie, you and I have kind of come across a practice where there's possibly one member of the team promoted and the other one wanted that promotion into a particular role. And the competitive position could even be that they don't, particularly if one team member doesn't see the other one as deserving of that new position or the position that they hold. And so that develops a bit of a conflict. Conflicting interests as well. I've also worked in teams where there was one team member that became a vegan, and for some reason another team member just had a problem with it. It's like, what's the big deal? Like, it's her diet, not to her. But every chance she got, she jumped on this person as, whenever she was told, it's because you're a vegan, and she made her kind of pay for it. So conflicting interests might be another one.
That's an interesting one, isn't it?
Oh, it is interesting because it was the owner of the practice that was having the problem with it. So it was there was a bit of a kind of an abuse of the position there too, to make her feel bad for a lifestyle choice. Incompatible working styles. This is a classic. When we've got different levels of enthusiasm around working with different team members. Some are jumping in there every day. Good morning. Whoa, let's go. Let's have a great day. Others are dragging their feet and going, oh my God, another day. And that can cause a bit of a conflict. It can also cause a conflict when there are differing levels of participation and performance. There's an underperformer, there's an overperformer, or a great performer. And another series of podcasts I've been listening to lately, which I've already mentioned in past lessons, just around recruitment. And this guy who I've heard on various podcasts talks about, if you've got A-type players, they deliver a strong performance, they come in with top happy energy, they will tolerate a B-level performer where they're just kind of, they're doing well, but they're not kind of over the top, but they'll never tolerate a C performer. And so when you've got different ways of working, different levels of performance that you're putting, different dedication to the job, that can start to cause a bit of conflict. You know, one person feeling like they're pulling the weight of another. Or it could even be the other way around, the underperformer criticizing the one that's overperforming because it makes them look bad. Judgment over other team members' performance, as we were just mentioning. Poor communication, that's a classic. I mean, poor communication is going to cause dysfunction between two team members, between two intimate partners, between two siblings, between two friends. Poor communication is a big one. Also, poor leadership, that when you start seeing elements of this, that you're not doing anything about it as the leader of the organization or the manager. When a conflict arises between team members, swift management is the key. Again, it's one of those situations where bring it back to a home situation, a family unit situation. How long would you tolerate one sibling speaking very poorly to another one before you stood in and said, that's not how we behave here? And so this is where one of those examples of swift management is key. If conflict is allowed to fester for a prolonged period of time, resentment can develop. A marriage counselor said in an interview once that I heard that if a couple comes to her angry at each other, she knows they have a good chance to work through their issues and become happy with one another again. However, if they come to her resentful, the chances of either of them seeing the other through their own resentment are limited, and she frequently sees these couples separate. And I think that's the thing. Prolonged, unaddressed anger or frustration can lead to resentment. And once we get into resentment, all the baggage has become so locked in, it's very difficult to move on. So that's why swift management of these sort of things is really helpful. And also the degree of difficulty of that conversation from the manager or leader. When it's early stages, that's a pretty lighthearted conversation. What's going on here? When, you know, what's your two opinions about each other? Let's see what we can do to make it helpful. By the time that goes on, there's been so much damage down the track that becomes a far more intense conversation. Anger refers to a strong feeling of displeasure. Resentment, on the other hand, is a feeling of bitterness that the individual experiences. Two quite different spaces to be in. I'm sure we can all relate to both of them. Keeping with the marriage metaphor, prevention is far better and so much easier than cure. If a couple developed excellent communication skills, sought to understand and appreciate each other's strengths and weaknesses, and showed appreciation for the other, then the inevitable gripes and arguments would be resolved. However, if the couple did not communicate well, failed to appreciate the other, and did not show signs of concern when the other was troubled, then you can imagine that their chances of overcoming such hurdles without developing a level of resentment would be slim. Building a strong team culture can be an excellent preventive measure against team conflict. And this is one of the wonderful benefits of really paying attention to team culture, making sure that everyone's participating in what it's going to look like and implementing it and then fostering it. Because what you're doing in essence is teaching everybody how to get along with each other and how to achieve things as a group. And so your levels of communication have been identified of what is helpful, what is not helpful. And so you are lowering the chances of team conflict even arising. So see below for a guide on the management of team conflict and the following explanations. Okay, so prevention. The steps that you can take to prevent team conflict are all the steps detailed in the previous lesson on building a strong team. And so we're developing and fostering a great team culture. And remember, team culture is one of those ones where it really does benefit when the whole team are involved in that process. It makes it a lengthier process, but it makes implementation and fostering of it far more easy and successful. So just go through those steps of getting the team culture organized with your team participation. Ensure team members have avenues for communication. How often is it that you hear of a married couple or intimate couple and one partner leaves the other and the other one goes, I didn't even know that there was a problem. And the first one's like, what do you mean you didn't realize there was a problem? I live with problems every day. We have to develop avenues for communication. So these sort of things get spoken about. The avenues of communication that we can have with a loving couple, they could just on a regular basis go out for a dinner and just talk. Maybe if they are having troubles, they go to a marriage counselor. So there is the avenue for communication there as well. Maybe we make sure that we're creating an environment that if our partner is ever having an issue, I'm not doing anything to stop that person from talking to me about it, because we can make each other pay emotionally, silent treatment, passive aggressively. We can become aggressive. We can become overly emotional and cry the minute the other person talks to us. That's all that's shutting down communication. That's providing a cost to communication. And so we can do the same in team environments as well. That when team members, are there avenues for communication, such as one-on-one during the team performance assessments? Have you got open door management where anyone can just come to you and have a chat about somebody else they're having trouble with? What happens? What's the team culture in terms of if two team members are having a problem with each other? What is and once management and the leadership understand that that's happening, what is their action? If their action is to ignore it, that becomes part of your culture. But if your action is, let's take a step to the next helpful step towards resolving this, then that becomes your team culture. So make sure that team members actually have the opportunity to raise something if there was something to raise, and don't provide any cost to them for it. Make part of your team culture is when people raise things, that's the next helpful step, because that triggers helpful action. Practice open door management, absolutely. So anyone can come to you with anything. And also that practice open door management, that element of it as well is, remember we talked last lesson about braving, Brené Brown's braving. And the braving is an acronym, BRAVING, and I won't be able to remember all of them. B is boundaries. R is maybe, I don't know. Responsibility. A is, I don't know. But V, we'll go back and remind ourselves of what braving is. V is the vault. Whenever you are a practice manager or a practice owner and you provide your staff members with the opportunity to come to you and talk to you about things, you must practice the vault. You must ask them, what are you happy for me to tell the other person about this conversation? What do you want me to remain silent about? And if there are any elements that you must keep in the vault, you keep in the vault no matter what. Don't say to the other party anything that was supposed to be in the vault, but also don't say to anybody the stuff that's meant to be in the vault. Just keep it to yourself. Make sure you're creating an environment that no matter what, that team member knows, I never hear them talking about somebody behind anyone's back. And so I can come to this person, and you're developing that trust. So do make sure you do that.
You can open that link, Julie. I've just put in the chat and it's got the acronym.
You are a legend. I could just go back in the lesson as well.
Oh, you can as well.
Okay, so braving, boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. Thank you for that, Meanie. So if you go back into was it this, Charles? Was it this section here? I
think so. Yeah.
Building trust.
Yeah,
that's it. So watch that video under the Charles Covey's 2 spiritual elements of great teams. Watch that video of Brené Brown talking about braving. It's excellent, really excellent. A very good thing to play to your whole team, discuss each element as a whole team, so you guys start to understand what it means to be trustworthy in your organization. Allow for venting. This is an important aspect. Quite often, how much, when you speak to your friends about the frustrations you've got with a partner or a child of yours or a work situation, how much better do you feel just getting it off your chest? And so recognize that venting isn't always bitching. Bitching is when you kind of feed into it yourself as well, and it goes on for a bit longer, then you're talking about it again the next day as well. Venting is just getting it off your chest. So allow your team members to come in and go blah, 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 and say, I get it. Do you want me to do anything about that? And if they say no, say, great, I'm pleased that you've been able to get that off your chest. Again, don't share it with anybody. Don't make it bigger than it needs to be, because that can have a very firm full stop, a very firm period at the end of that vent, and it's not a problem anymore. And it served its purpose. If they want something done about it, then you can go further and do something about it. But do allow people just to vent stuff out, because that's a nice release valve for all of us. Check in with staff regularly. This is super important. Super important as well for newer team members that come into your organization. Super important as well if you are changing your management style somewhat to become more approachable. You need to create the environment, show the example of what that is. And so whenever you find yourself alone with another team member, just ask them, so how's everything going? Are you happy? Any frustrations? Anything great that's going on? Just check in with them, and you'll find that the universe plays its role, and you will be talking to somebody and they'll share something with you and go, man, that was an important conversation. I'm pleased I asked. And so sometimes the universe plays in your favor. And I used to, certainly with my, when I had my practice, at some point, I usually didn't have an office. For the first few years, I didn't have an office. I was just sitting on the front desk. But then when I had a receptionist and I was in the office behind the reception area, people would just, the patient wouldn't turn up, they're running a bit early. They just kind of come and hover in your doorway. And there was usually a reason behind it. They may not have even been aware of the reason behind it, but usually there'd be a helpful conversation. Build into your team culture the concept of what can I do for you? Again, this is right here, there's a presentation on the what can I do for you concept, and we spoke about that last lesson as well, where we've got these silicon bands we're going to be making up. I've got to remind myself to make up those magnets, because the clinical staff can't wear the silicon bands for infection control issues. But this is where you've got team members. Part of your team culture is that you're always asking yourselves, what can I do for each other? What can I do for this person? What can I do for Amina? What can I do for Jessie and her team? And when we are approaching each other with that mindset, that's a very generous mindset to have. And what happens when we have that kind of generous mindset is that we become biased to their positive and how we can be helpful. And we start to ignore and not even see the negative things that someone might be doing. So that can really, once it's fostered and really been maintained in your organization, that by itself can really help prevent any kind of team dysfunction and conflict. So with the conflict itself, if it does arise, do your best to manage it swiftly. Unmanaged team conflict results in many drawbacks, all of which we want to avoid. Resentment, we've spoken about. Escalation, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger if it doesn't get resolved. We lose good people. Good people don't like living in conflict. They don't like working in conflict at all. They like turning up to work, having a great day, and going home again feeling really satisfied. If the environment shifts to one that isn't that, they will go. The bad people will stay, the troublemakers will stay, and the good people will go. It will eventually have an impact on the team. As you know, misery loves company. Gossipers love company. Gossip doesn't happen unless there's too many people involved. And so it does end up having an impact on the team, because one by one, further people are actually brought into that web. It has an impact on patients. The minute the team are dissatisfied in any way, or the team is negatively impacted, it definitely affects the way that they engage with their patients. It has an impact on the systems as well, pardon me, because this is where you end up falling back and relying on the fact that there are systems in place, and quite often all of our systems aren't robust enough to be able to contend with conflict on the top of it. And so the systems can break down. And certainly an impact on leadership. This is one of the pointy ends of the spear in terms of leadership, and where you have to really practice effective leadership. And if the leader doesn't feel they're up to it, they won't manage it well, or they'll avoid it. And then the perception of their leadership by the rest of the team will be lowered. The resolution. We can be forgiven for thinking that in order to resolve a team conflict, we need to have all of the answers. This is one of those situations where don't put that pressure on you. You can't have all the answers. You don't know all the details. You don't know how all of these people feel about each other and themselves in the process. You haven't got all the information, so you can't have all of the answers. And quite often, an answer that's going to suit one person absolutely won't suit the other person. So it won't be a resolution. But the wonderful thing is that you do not need all the answers in this particular case when two people are against each other. What is required is a thoughtful and considerate approach. So this is one of those situations where allow yourself to be in a space where you're constantly absorbing further details, further information, and you are changing your mind about how to manage it all the way through. You're being very flexible of mind through it, and know that that's okay. When there are two people in conflict with one another, and this process has all come from a big conflict that I had between two team members. I thought they were getting along fine. I thought everyone was getting along fine. And then one morning, they were both called Joe. One was Joanne and one was Jody. And one morning, as I'm driving into the car park at work, one of the Joes rang me and said, the other Joe has just assaulted me in the surgery during setup, and I'm very upset. And I thought, wow, that's I've never actually worked in an environment, a team where two team members were actually in physical conflict with one another. And so from the management of that situation, that whole situation you can hear about or watch on the podcast episode link there. I take you all the way through, but it's from that wonderful experience that at the time I thought was terrible, but it was from that wonderful experience that taught me how to move through and assist two team members who are in conflict. So number one lesson is, it is important when we are in conflict with the other person, our own story is the most important one. Their story is not important at all. Our own story is most important. And you can sometimes feel like you need to come in as the spiritual, moral superior and say, this is who I deem to be the better person. No, not at all. What you do want to do is get people out of that space where they feel like they need to share their version of the story. And the way we do that is getting them to share their version of the story. Don't do it together. You have a one-on-one with each of them. Tell me exactly what's going on for you. And then just let them speak. Don't judge what they say. Just listen to them. Only when they get everything off their chest and you say, I hear you, do they then relax and they can open their ears to anything else other than their own story. Pardon me. So bring them in for a one-on-one. Tell me what's been going on for you, just as a buddy, not as a, just as a caring parent kind of thing, not as a judgmental team member or manager. Then just listen. Make sure you don't pass any judgment and stop that voice in your head thinking, I need a solution. What's the solution? What's the solution? Don't think that. You don't need a solution at all. Definitely do not take sides. Do not take sides. You could say something like, gosh, if I had similar experiences to that too, I can imagine being upset as well. You can say things like that, but do not say, oh, that person was wrong and you are right. No, don't take sides. Then now that you've done that bit, because you don't need to figure out who's right and who's wrong, who's a good person, who's a bad person. You won't, that truth isn't out there for you to know, because they've got their version, they're two separate versions, and you've got the reality of what actually did happen, but everything's perspective. And usually things have a long history behind them too. So it's not just what happened in the moment. And so once you've got everybody aired their grievances, like that Seinfeld episode on Festivus for the rest of us, okay, this is the airing of grievances. And they haven't upset each other because they've only done it to you. The next step is your next best helpful step. And that is, okay, let's describe the behavior expected from this point forward. We're not needing to resolve the conflict that did happen, but let's figure out what needs to happen from this point forward. And this is where your team culture can be your saving grace. Have within your team culture. And usually these additions to your team culture are added and evolved because of situations like this. So don't resist situations like this. Go, fantastic. This will make our team culture even more robust. So go get everyone to go read back through the team culture, again, still one-on-one, and say, okay, well, this is how we resolve conflicts in this situation. And depending on the level of conflict, it might be that you get each party to come in and apologize to each other. Possibly you'll listen in that podcast episode that wasn't the case with the situation that we had. I didn't believe we could get to a point in those early stages where they'd actually apologize to each other with any kind of sincerity. But what I did do was, with me one-on-one with one Joe and then one-on-one with the other Joe, this is how we behave as a team in this practice. We are polite to one another. We are respectful of one another. So regardless of how your heart feels, a surface level of behavior, this is what you're supposed to do. You smile at each other when you walk past each other in the hallway. You ask each other, what can I do for you in terms of setting your surgery up? I can do that stereo for you. I'm already here doing my tray. Then you, in the mornings, you say good morning, and the evenings you say goodbye and thank you for the day. That's the behavior that is expected. So spell it out, act it out if you wish, but that's what's required from this point forward. Tell these team members, I know you may not mean it, and that's okay, but you must fake it. This is a workplace where you see patients. We need to be able to be appropriate, professional, and friendly. And so it's okay to fake it. Don't expect them to have a turnaround of heart in a moment. When you see them doing these good things, go to them and say, thank you. I see the effort you're making. It's so appreciated. Thank you. And keep checking in on them. How are you going? Like for the next day, then a couple of days down the track, how's things going? How's things going? You'll see in that podcast episode that really quite quickly, these people started to get along again. This is going from a physical pushing and shoving in the surgery to getting along again well with each other by lunchtime. It's about you recognizing your role in creating an environment, showing them the path forward, because they're in their head too much. They're in their heart too much to be able to see that path forward. And so do make sure that you are providing them with the next steps. If the next steps are up to them, they'll do what they find appropriate. But when we are being paid for our time working for a dental practice, during the times that we're being paid, we need to do what's appropriate and has been decided upon as appropriate from the dental practice's perspective. So once they go home, they can do whatever the hell they want. That's their own free will, free life. But while they're here, this is what's expected, and it's up to you to remind them, this is, despite how you feel, this is how you behave here. And a good question to ask, and we might add that in here, is, I'm going to see if I can do it right now. Don't take sides, describe the hate behavior expected, and then ask them, ask for a commitment. Do you see yourself being able to do this? And that's important because
Just for.
Sorry?
Just the word for.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Do you know how often I do that? All the time. That and the for and the, I always get the, I type too quickly. I'm not a touch typist. And the reason why that's really important to say, this is the behavior that's required, that you're going to say hello to each other in the morning with a smile on your face, all the things. The reason why it is so important to then ask them, see yourself being able to do this? If they say no, they can't come into work that day. That's then going down the path of performance management, because their attitude is such that they're not going to do anything helpful, and another conflict will arise. It will deepen. Another event will happen. But more likely than not, when you say, you're being paid for your time here, while you're here, this is the way we behave. That's part of our team culture. Do you see yourself being able to do this? If and when they say yes, it'll be hard, but yes, that's a verbal commitment, and they are more likely to be able to do it because of consistency. Robert Cialdini's 6 principles of influence. What we say, we are more likely to do because we've stated out outside of our mouth. Got dust on me and I keep seeing it in my peripheral vision. So that is the process. When you've got 2 people in conflict, you see how you don't have to resolve the conflict itself. You just have to show them the path forward, get everything off their chest, opportunity for things off their chest, but then you show them the path forward, and then you encourage and reward and check in. This is someone that's not, what we've just spoken about is a real conflict between 2 team members. However, what happens when you are trying to manage a singular employee's poor behavior? And this is such a beautiful image. It's just so, it makes me giggle every single time I watch it. I see it. So when we're talking about bad employee behavior, what is it and how do we manage it? What is it? You'll relate to many of these things. You would have worked with these sort of environments in your world. Gossiping, blaming, rudeness, disrespect, avoidance of responsibilities, lack of punctuality. I've got one person in my mind when I'm reading out all of these. So they often have lots of them. Unreliable, poor performance, lack of response to coaching and training, resistant to change, negative attitude, and is always the yes, but. And so you could say something to them that makes perfect sense, such as, we should put this new system in place. It's going to be helpful. Yeah, but I don't know if everyone's going to get on board with it. Yeah, but I don't think it's going to work in this practice. Yeah, but I don't think our patients will like it. Well, what about you say, your performance has been lacking? Yeah, but there's a good reason, because Amina's been really irritating me. Yeah, but I really deserve a pay rise. Yeah, but it used to be better here, but now it's not. So it's not my fault. And so they've got the yes, but. And this is the kind of attitude they have. This is the kind of appearance they have during the morning huddle. Staff meetings, that we've seen that look on people's faces, meaning when we do team training sometimes.
I think it's most at you.
Let's face it, we resist being upfront with bad behavior. But why? And there are a few reasons why we don't launch ourselves into managing poor behavior straight away. Number one, we like to be liked. That's part of our most basic drivers, that we need to be accepted in the teams that we're involved with, because back in, ancient times, if we weren't part of a team, a tribe, we're out there on our own, we would likely starve, not be attacked by animals and all the things. And so we have a natural tendency just to conform to the people around us and not to create ruffles and waves. So we like to be liked. We like to be accepted. We enjoy having good news and avoid giving bad news. We don't have any problem in saying to someone, hey, guess what? You get a pay rise. But we have to really stress about it and not sleep for a couple of days before we say, hey, your performance isn't up to scratch. We find it easier to compliment than we do criticize. This is all good stuff. This means that we're not assholes moving through this earth. We don't like to be the reason someone is upset, emotional, or angry. That's for sure. Most of us don't want to be the reason why someone starts to cry or someone gets really angry. We fear the response. We wonder how badly the other person may react to our bad news. And that imagining becomes what we try to avoid. We're not avoiding the conversation. We're avoiding the, how bad could this actually get in that office? And then what do I do with that? I don't know what to do with that. This is a big one too. We fear making things worse. We are afraid of fumbling through our delivery of the bad news and making a bad situation worse. And goodness knows, this isn't so much making a bad situation worse, it's making the conversation ridiculous. I've had a conversation with someone where I thought I was being very effective in pinpointing what they were doing wrong. And then I overheard that person being asked about what the meeting was all about. And she said, oh, no, she just said this couple of things. So it was a good meeting. She got nothing of the message I was trying to portray. I'm like, I think I've got to be clearer. But we can sometimes fear that we're making it worse. And so sometimes when you've got someone who's a bad attitude, you can think, gosh, what if after this conversation, their attitude worsens even more? And then what do I do about it? So therefore, it is far easier just to let things slide for today, and then the next day, and then the next day. But oh, the consequences, we do make our lives hard again. And so, yes, it's hard to have the conversation, but it's also hard living with the consequences of not having the conversation. So choose your hard. That's a lovely thing, that choose your hard. And that came from that meme that we saw online that said, exercising every day and eating the right foods is hard. But being obese and being difficult to move and having aches and pains all the time, that's hard as well. So choose your hard. Okay. I know I have to have that difficult conversation, but now what? Number one hint around this is accept your feelings of discomfort. Don't try to resist them. Don't think there's something wrong with you having those those uncomfortable feelings, because it's all these reasons and more that we have that discomfort. And that's a good thing. It's good to want to be liked. It's good to want to be accepted. This helps us become a very active, good member of any team. So accept your feelings of discomfort. They are normal and they are an indicator of your humanity. Embracing your discomfort as normal will in itself just diminish its intensity. You're accepting it. Even though I feel uncomfortable, I'm very happy that this is the path I'm choosing to have this conversation. Number 2, everything is difficult until it is easy. We have had to have many difficult discussions over the years, especially when I first owned my practice, and I thought I'm never going to get used to this. However, it was quite interesting. It only took about 3 or 4 difficult conversations before I was 100% comfortable going into those conversations. It doesn't take long at all. So paying attention to the fear aspect does no good. It sets me on a path of avoidance when you're just focusing on the fear. Instead, focus on the positive result that you want and what you can do to make it happen. What's the next helpful thing I can do to get us to that nice, bright, shiny place where this person's attitude's actually turned around and they're a great member of the team again, or we've determined it can't turn around and they've either quit or we've let them go. So sunshine is coming as long as I just do the thing. So don't focus on the fear, focus on the results that you will be able to achieve doing the next helpful thing. Prepare for success. The minute we prepare, we feel a lot better about things. Never handle a sensitive situation when you are angry or emotional. This is huge. When we are angry or emotional, our own listening ability goes down. We become impatient for the solution. We become frustrated with the people in front of us. So don't manage these sort of conversations when you're angry or emotional. It's a bad filter and it will negatively impact that conversation. These feelings push out reason and fairness. Angry people are only concerned with how a situation affects them, and the needs of others are ignored. So take the time to consider the situation from the other person's side. Really put yourself in their position, knowing them as a human being, and imagine what they will be thinking and feeling. Because keep in mind that it's our thoughts that generate our feelings, and it's our feelings that generate our behavior. So think, what thoughts are going on in this other person's mind that's making them feel a particular way, that's then having them behave in a certain way? How would you react if the roles were reversed? How would someone need to approach you in that mindset to be able to do the next helpful thing? Your empathetic approach will soften your message without diminishing its importance. This is big, big, big. Don't think you have to yell and scream and be very commanding in order to get your message across. You can be very empathetic and still get that message across. Your employee response. Keep in mind, you do not have control at all over the recipient's response. That is his or her business. Allow them just to respond. I mean, what you can impact is the environment that you create, the frame of the conversation. But ultimately, that person, if they're the type that are going to, in that situation, or they choose in that situation to respond angry, hurt, upset, crying, whatever, the silent treatment, whatever the thing is, that's up to them. That's their business. So do it, just allow them to react in the moment, recognizing that their reaction in the moment is 90% likely not to be the same reaction that they've got to the situation after they've had time to contemplate, think about things, talk it over with others. Just as many of us have not learned how to deliver bad news, many have not yet learned how to receive it either. And so we still receive bad news in a very childlike way, because we don't normally train ourselves into how will I, if for any reason I get in trouble here at work, how am I going to respond to that? It's very reactive in the moment without any preparation. So just allow them to be immature in the moment. Allow them to struggle in the moment. If needed, if they are getting really upset, either angry or crying, suggest they go out for a walk, and then you can continue discussion once they've had a chance to consider what has been said. Always allow that time to just go out, think about things, come back. Let's have a more sensible discussion once you come back. There is a great 5-step process that we've created, so it helps you bring to your mind the pathway to help resolve these sort of conflicts. So with this guide, you'll be using this when you're managing bad behavior of a team member. So do think about those gossiping, blaming, rudeness, disrespect, avoidance of responsibilities. Think about that list and whatever's going on for that person. This is what you're trying to resolve. And the 5-step process is listen, bear witness, feedback, plan, and support. And this is what each of those elements are. Pardon me. First of all, listen, arrange a meeting with the team member and ask how they see their performance over the past period of time. Ask how they are. And even though you've got stuff going on in your mind, keep in mind, you're in a space of discovery here. You're trying to figure out what doesn't make sense to you. They used to be a good performer. Now they're not. I don't know what's happened. So I'm going to ask them what's happened. The second thing is bear witness. This is the act of giving evidence to confirm the events that have happened and the things that have been said, provide specifics on what has been observed and heard. So this is where you say to them, on this particular instance, I heard you gossiping about blah, blah, or this specific time, blah, blah, saw you speak really badly to this other person. Or we've noticed that you've been giving Sally the silent treatment. And so this is where you say, this is and be as specific as possible. On this day with this person, you said that. Be as specific as possible. The more specific you are, the less chances they've got to say, no, that's not what happened at all. But keep in mind, you don't even need to prove what's happened in the past. And the feedback that you got might be false, may be misleading. None of that matters. But what you need to do is do the bear witness. This is specifically what has me concerned. And then ask for feedback for the person, because what will they do? They'll go straight into defensive mode. So what gets them out of defensive mode? That you hear them. Now the employee has felt heard by you, they will be more open to listen to what you have to say. And the thing that you asked during the feedback section is, what do you think about what I've just said? They may start offering it up straight away. Anyway, when they do, just listen to them. Okay. I understand. I hear you. I hear you. And so get them to provide that feedback section is just so important. But receive that feedback in a way that you don't need to determine if it's true or not. Because then, just as in team conflict, we're going to the next step, the plan. Together, make a plan moving forward. Collaborate on what can be done to achieve more desirable results. And there is a very good step of actually documenting this plan and getting it signed, because you may need that plan if performance doesn't improve, because you might have to go down a warnings path. But the plan really is saying, this is what the behavior that we need to show. We don't gossip here. I want to see you avoiding gossiping, not instigating gossiping, and not participating in gossiping. Or that person you're giving the silent treatment to, I want you to get into the habit of saying good morning in a very happy way in the morning, offer to do their stereo or help them out in some way through the day. And at the end of the day, seek them out, look them in the eye, thank you for today, have a good evening. And so you make actionable steps as part of the plan moving forward. Get their It's always ideal if you can say to them, what helpful steps, such as these ones that I've just mentioned, are there any other helpful steps that you think you could take to help improve that performance in that particular way? It could be turning up on time. For the next week, I want you to be able to turn up on time. If you can't, contact us straight away. And so whatever evidence you would need to see in order to be proven that this employee has a good attitude and wants to improve, have that part of the plan. Don't make it too grandiose. Don't make it 20 things. We just want to make sure that we're on the right path. And if they can collaborate on that, that is even better, because if they've come up with the ideas, they are more likely going to be able to do them enthusiastically. So that's the plan. And then support. Check in with the employee regularly to let them know whether they are on track, acknowledge wins, to provide ideas for more improvement. Let them know you are on their side and rooting for their success. That's key. Put yourself in the right framework. You're not the disciplinarian that is looking for them to fail again, you are the cheerleader that's going to really help them improve. They may not have a turnaround of attitude. An attitude, a poor attitude is something only they can do something about. You can't motivate somebody out of a bad attitude. And so that's where you have to go down that warnings process if they have got a bad attitude, if they don't see themselves being able to do these sort of helpful things. But your role is to create the environment where success is likely. And that's the kind of support they need to do that. Definitely establish consequences if things don't change. People need to know exactly where they're at. If things don't improve, meet with the employee and be very clear about the consequences they face. Let me know, let me tell you, if I don't see a turnaround in your behavior, as we've discussed, you'll be given a warning. If I don't see a turnaround in your behavior, as we have discussed, you'll be given your last warning, after which you will be let go. If I don't see a turnaround between now and our next meeting, you will be let go. Make sure it's very, very specific. These sort of conversations, you don't want to have a lack of clarity at all. You want them to know exactly what is at stake. Every step of these sort of things, document those discussions and get them to sign off on it as well. And you can even, if they're not happy with some of it, then you can make handwritten notes and then they can sign off on it. But what they're signing off on is that you have had that discussion. Manage yourself. And keep in mind, with all of this stuff, we do have a download for you. So we've got some guidance there. Another step is managing yourself. What attitude are we approaching this issue with? Are we thinking to ourselves, oh, this person with this attitude, they're never going to change? Or are we going, everything will work out fine? No, it's not going to be roses, no dramas. Neither of these is helpful. We do need to be very honest with our assessment of our employees' behavior and what you see. Understand your responsibility in creating an environment for the employee to achieve success, and be proactive and support the process. And do recognize there's stuff that people say, and then there's the evidence of what they do. People can say to the cows come home, I'm approaching things better, my attitude's better. But if the evidence isn't there, it's not happening. So really look for that evidence, create opportunities for them to be able to provide that evidence by saying, this is the evidence I need to see over the coming week, over the next 2 weeks. This is what I need to see from you. Certainly be consistent. If you say you're not okay with the behavior, don't sometimes be okay with it. If you fail to make employees accountable for their bad behavior every time they do it, or every time any employee does it, you are accepting it. This is crucial, isn't it? Gosh, we want everyone to turn up on time, but one team member doesn't, and you don't say anything about it. What does that say to the whole team? We want everyone to turn up on time. But you, as the owner, for example, and you're the dentist, you're late for your first patient every now and again. What does that say? You want everyone to turn up on time, but this one person doesn't turn up on time. You have you chat with them about it, and then they do it again, but you don't chat with them about it. They do it again, you don't chat with them about it. So we need to be consistent with maintaining these boundaries, maintaining these expectations, and making people accountable for that. This is the wonderful thing. It gets easier all the time. What has been proven again and again is that anxiety and trepidation felt in the build up to these discussions reduces dramatically with each occurrence. Gosh, Minnie, have you had sleepless nights? Fretting day upon day until that conversation happens.
Yeah, and the relief after it's all over is exhilarating.
Oh, and it's never as bad as you build it up to be either. Pardon me. Certainly in my own personal perspective, that my confidence developed quickly after only 3 or 4 difficult discussions. The increasing comfort I felt in initiating difficult conversations actually surprised me. I couldn't believe it happened so quickly. By embracing the difficult conversations you need to have, you will likely discover, like me, like Amina, that after just a handful of times, you will start experiencing the following. You will approach these discussions calmly. Your mind will function well, and you will think more creatively about solutions. My printer's not happy. Someone's printing something. Hopefully that will come through all right. So all of a sudden you're very calm. And the minute you're calm, your mind works better. You will not try to rush these sort of discussions, but instead sit back, really deal with the issues at the time, ensuring all sides of the issue are being heard and considered. You won't feel that you must produce all of the answers straight away, realizing you are free to contemplate and come back together for a follow-up meeting. We may not have achieved a huge amount of progress here, but we've achieved some. So let's re-meet again in another week or another day. And we'll continue the conversations once we've had a chance to assess the information around us. Let me just get more paper in that printer for my husband. And so the other thing with this level of confidence that you do develop, the level of comfort you develop with these sort of conversations when you do tackle them over and again, is that your whole approach to them is different. Back at the start, my approach was I want to get this over and done with. But now when I approach them, I think to myself, I want to manage this really well. I want to discover more, get a full picture. Whereas in the past, you might be really resisting that conversation. Now you're like jumping at the chance to improve things, to move out of this conflict, to move away from this poor employee performance. I can't wait to get to the next helpful step. So your whole mindset around it really does change. And so that's managing two team members in conflict with one another, a particular employee that's displaying bad behavior. What about this? And it's a tricky one. Dealing with passive aggressive team members. We all have or will at some stage be in a relationship with someone who displays passive aggressive tendencies. They could be a family member, friend, or work colleague. Despite our best intentions, often it is we who act in a passive aggressive manner. Passive aggressive behavior is relatively common because it is a way of expressing our displeasure at a personal situation without actually having to tackle the issue front on and become overtly aggressive. So let's look at what passive aggressive behavior actually is, what it looks like. A passive person, a meek passive person, the kind of responses are you can't say no. So you just say yes to everything. Yeah, I can do that for you. Yep, I'll do that, just because you can't say no. You avoid conflict at all costs. Others take advantage of you. You feel like a victim. So that's passive behavior. Mildly passive aggressive is you're not aware that you're angry. You think about revenge. Isn't that terrible? I'm going to get that person. And you think, I've done this before too. I've absolutely been mildly passive aggressive. I've got tendencies of that. And that's where, you have an interaction with somebody, but then the thoughts that are predominant in your mind is how you could have an argument with them and win, rather than just thinking about something else for the day. You can feel resentful. You act unhappy to make a point. Gosh, haven't we all done that? Acting unhappy to make a point. Let me just pass this to husband. I think he's about to go out and he won't be able to leave without this. Make sure the page is there. Passive aggressive behavior is, we're going to talk about that in just a second. Aggressive behavior is you deliberately hurt one another, other people. So you deliberately hurt them. You yell and raise your voice. You are physically aggressive. You act in anger. That's obvious. Aggressive is obvious. So what's the passive aggressive stuff? The stuff that is also damaging to relationships and damaging as a team member. You deny that you're angry. You use sarcasm a lot. You plan revenge. You don't just think about revenge. You plan revenge. And this is where they can sabotage other team members' performance or the success of the practice. You try to get them back in secret. So passive aggressive tendencies, as you can see, have the potential to be quite explosive. We want to get rid of the passive aggressive and aggressive side of things. So passive aggressive behavior displays itself in many forms. Resentment, sullenness, moodiness, complaining, sarcasm, petty grumblings, stubbornness, purposeful inefficiency, chronic lateness, sabotage, silent treatment, that's a bad one, blaming others, withholding praise and withholding affection. This is a thing. They are more kind, more generous, more fun and happy with some team members, but not that one. Terrible. The passive-aggressive team member in a dental practice situation is highly damaging if not managed correctly, because the problem with passive-aggressive is it's usually the victim of the passive-aggressive behavior that think they're at fault. I think it's just me, rather than the passive-aggressive person recognizing that just because you're not aggressive, overtly aggressive, doesn't mean you're having this damaging impact on the people around you or a particular person around you. It is easy to feel controlled by a passive aggressive. Often it is the passive aggressive who stays and the other employees start to quit. I have been witness to in practices where the growth of the practice is not occurring because it will trigger the passive aggressive office manager into a reaction that makes everyday life uncomfortable for the owner. The victims know they should do something about it, but they feel incapable of doing so. And I think this kind of gets it to the core. It's a passive aggressive tendency. If you're dealing with a passive aggressive person, if they're controlling the behavior of, or the way things are functioning, they're controlling the way things are functioning without actually saying any words out of their mouth and demanding it and being direct. They're doing it. And, one of the practices that I've got in mind, this person is, this office manager is delightful and friendly. And that's part of the facade, because the practice itself, they can't make any changes because they're so afraid of upsetting this one person and then putting up with the sarcasm, the silent treatment, all the things. Passive-aggressive behavior stems from a need by the perpetrator to exert control over others, but with the desire to do this without any conflict. The passive works hard to avoid conflict. Confrontation causes a loss of sense and reasoning. So the passive person works hard to avoid conflict. Confrontation causes a loss of sense and reasoning. And so that's where they become more passive aggressive, because they want the resulting control, but they don't want to be in conflict about getting it. Passive aggressors seek out those who don't object to their behaviors. Once a person calls them out on their behaviors, they are highly unlikely to exhibit their passive aggressive behaviors on that person anymore. They'll still do it to other people. But if you are dealing with a passive aggressive and you don't like it, then you can calmly go to that person and say, this is my experience of you. This is the situations, and this is what was done. I'm just letting you know I don't appreciate it and I don't like it. You don't have to have them agree with you. You don't have to have them apologize to you. Just calling them out on it, they will stop doing it to you because they don't like conflict. You don't have to come to them aggressively, just directly. Failing to step up to the passive aggressors means that you will remain a victim. And this is the harsh thing. The people who are a victim to the passive aggressive people are those that don't like being direct, are those that don't like to have any conflict as well, but they also don't have a strong sense of needing control over a situation. Yet it's them that need to stand up and say, I don't like this, so stop it, in order for them to be relieved of that victim status in the relationship. The only way to stop a passive aggressor from having a controlling force over your team is to identify the behaviors and bring them out into the open. Address them face to face, not via email or phone. And so when you keep in mind that when you very calmly, in control, get a passive aggressive in front of you and say, these are the behaviors I'm observing, and we don't want it to be this way. So definitely stay calm. The minute you get upset, they've got control over that situation because you're the one that's upset. Separate the person from the behavior. It is not the person that is unwanted, but the passive aggressive behavior. That's always the case, even with poor employee performance. When you ask anybody, do you want this performer to hang around? They usually go, nah, they can quit, I don't mind. But if you ask them, if this person turned their attitude around and became a great performer, would you want them? Yeah, sure. We don't have to go through the dramas of recruitment. Plus, when this person's good, they're great. And so definitely recognize that it's not you as a person that I've got a problem, it's just your behavior. And this is what I have identified in terms of behavior that I'm not finding helpful in this organization. Definitely be respectful in your approach. One, because they deserve it. Every human being deserves that. And two, because anything else will bring out the defensive style of that passive aggressive person. No progress can be made if someone is defensive because they're not listening to you. They're not willing to participate in the solution. They're going to remain in problem until you hear them. Your purpose in this conversation is to open up the channels of communication. Ask them to share their thoughts and feelings. What do you think about what I've just said to you? State specific interactions. When you criticized the nurse yesterday, it seemed to make her upset. That is not the way we want people to feel. Let's come up with a better approach next time. Don't ever get in a tit for tat. The perpetrator will attempt to raise issues from the past to justify current behavior. They'll raise issues of other team members, situations that they weren't a part of, things that they have observed, and just don't even go down that path. Just say, well, we're not talking about that. What we're talking about today is this, and we're not talking about anything else. Recognize that the aggressors actually want to be heard. That's the whole purpose of their passive aggressive behavior. They want to be heard. They want to be seen. They want to be relevant. They're just going about it in a crazy ass way. Do not just tell them what to do, but provide them with an acceptable method of achieving their goals. Tell them you should feel comfortable to speak your truth. The acceptable way to do that here is like this. So we understand that you had concerns about that, but the way to progress down a path of fixing that problem isn't using those passive aggressive tendencies. It's about having a one-on-one conversation with somebody in a calm way that's still respecting the other person. That's the way we do things here. If you feel there is no progress, cease the discussions and tackle them again later. Passive aggressive people will absolutely throw a spanner in the works and they won't want to go down your path of a solution. So if there's no progress, just say, I don't feel like things are progressing here. Let's leave it for today. Let's meet up again tomorrow or in a couple of days' time, and we'll tackle it again later. Keep in mind that even you as a practice manager, as a practice owner, with employees, with people who you are managing, no one has the right to change other people. However, as a leader of a group of employees, it is your responsibility to set a standard of communication and behavior that enables the growth and prosperity of all involved, including the business. And so it's up to you to make sure that you're creating an environment, fostering an environment where all the team members feel heard, well communicated, everyone understands the goals, everyone understands what their responsibilities are, all the things. And so allowing a passive aggressive personality type within your team to continue on without addressing that kind of behavior, you are not meeting your responsibility of creating that environment. It's not your right to control what they do, but what you can say is that within this environment, this is what's helpful. Do you see yourself being able to do that? And if they can't, that's when they go on to a performance improvement plan that may eventually end up in them quitting or you firing them. And so that brings us to the assignment for today, and that's the improved performance plan. And you can use this just as one of your things that you do within your organization should you need to. Pardon me. Name and date at the top, of course. And the improved performance plan starts with reflect back over a situation where a team member displayed bad or unhelpful behavior. Now identify the issue and a plan to move forward toward a successful outcome for both of you. So to describe the issue, consider the perspective of the employee, what would be going on for them that's triggered this bad behavior. What is the goal? Be specific in terms of the rectified behavior and or attitude. So therefore, what does success look like to you? And what resources, training and support can you think of that will help this employee be successful in adjusting their behavior? So how can you be a good support? What will your check-in routine be with this employee to provide feedback as to how they're going? How will you let the employee know that they've now been successful in their management of their bad behavior? So elements of that are also going to be touched on when we go into our next module, which is not next week, but our next module of human resources. And that's where you will see that we have downloads to help you in terms of performance improvement plans. So if there are any questions at all, let us know. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Jessie and team, for jumping online, you beautiful people. And anything else to mention before we sign off, Minnie?
No, I think we're good.
Well, I hope everyone has a fantastic week. Minnie, I'll see you a bit later.
Will do.
So jump on straight away or have a break. I don't mind.
Like 10:30ish or something.
10:30 sounds good. I'll see you at 10:30. In our
Yes.
huddle, we have our huddles too, and they're going. So see you later. Bye.
Bye.